I'd like to talk to you today about investing and midlife. Many concern themselves with, do they have enough investments at this stage in life? They ask if I'm going to be secure in my retirement. Have I made good choices? I'm not going to be addressing financial investments here, though. Something I think is more important. If you like what I have to say, I'm going to invite you to like, follow, comment, and share this post. So let's start by saying I'm not a financial wizard. So when I talk about investment, I'm not talking about finances because here I've made some stupid choices around investments in my life. Hundreds of thousands of dollars really lost in poor real estate decisions and following the encouragement of a family member for this really amazing opportunity, which ended up being a Ponzi scheme, losing the whole equity in my first property. And then just misusing credit over the years and buying stuff and using credit and not being able to pay off the bills fully each month, literally wasting thousands of dollars. So that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. So I want to talk about investments in midlife, and especially as a midlife man, this can be really important. Many of us arrive at midlife a little bit battered and bruised, worse for wear. We feel stuck oftentimes and uncertain, and there's this lack of clarity around what's next. Look, we've worked hard. We have some great experiences under our belt. We've got some successes for sure, but we've also got some failures. Many of us have been the primary breadwinners in our family and doing our best to up level over the years and earn more, to upgrade our property, our homes, to, keep the kids in their activities and to get family getaways maybe every once in a while and set money aside for the kids' education and eventual retirement. I mean, there's a lot going on. That's a lot of responsibility. And somewhere in all of that, you may have lost the focus on you, on your own self. Being the figurehead of the family. Now, don't get me wrong, I know there's women who play that role too, but I'm here to address you as men in midlife. Being the figurehead of the family often requires you to take the back seat and to not be looking after number one. I want you to start shifting and changing some of that. Maybe you're not as in shape as you once were because the fitness and the exercise stuff kind of got put aside. And maybe there are a few extra pounds and that dad body is doing, it's there and it's firmly established, right? Maybe the zest for life has faded a bit and your spark has dimmed over the years. And maybe you're not as revved up in the bedroom as you once were. These are all things that we're dealing with in midlife. And it's just a small sampling of the many issues. You probably have others too. So think of that as it's like a cocktail of kind of the crisis that we find ourselves in, or it lends to this sense of a crisis. I don't like to consider this stage in life a crisis. There's really more opportunity here when we dive deeper. So when we're feeling lost, feeling like maybe life has shortchanged us, questioning our decisions from the past for sure, and doubting ourselves and maybe getting stuck in pessimism. Sadly, this can go on for years. I don't want that for you. Look, depression rates go on up in this time of life, and men start to self-medicate, whether that's for booze or other substances. And a lot of it's about numbing some of the pain that we're feeling that maybe we're not even clearly recognizing. It can be a pretty dire situation, I know, that I'm painting, but the reality is 80% of us have some varying degree of a situation, crisis during this time of our life. And my job as a midlife coach is to get you out of that mess, to get you seeing things more clearly. But this is precisely where the problem lies because men, you have often taken a back seat in terms of overall priorities because of the family responsibilities and this reluctance that's been there around, investing in yourself. You've maybe conditioned yourself to prioritize the family's needs over yours. And that makes sense and that's fair. So don't judge yourself harshly. But now we need to look at investments maybe in a different way and look at this investment at this stage in life in you as not an expense, right? And this is often where people, I don't know if I can afford that. I don't know, if this is an expense that I can indulge in. Well, investing in yourself can look like a lot of things and it's very important. We've been exposed to this traditional family model for a long time where the parents are the breadwinners and they have to look after everyone. And that's fine, especially for men. But I want to advocate that stepping up to the plate and identifying your needs and putting them as necessary is important. And then allocating the necessary resources to look after yourself and to invest in yourself. We've been taught, from the banking sector that investment means, oh, putting money into, mutual funds and other banking vehicles to invest in your future for future wealth and all of that stuff. So we learn about financial investments to a degree, but do we actually learn about investing in ourselves? Because learning equals growing. And when we're growing, we're creating opportunities that we wouldn't otherwise see. When we're growing and investing in ourselves, we're plugging into our potential. Sadly, that's not the path for many men. Their job directs their life because it provides the income and the supports the family needs now and in the future. This perspective that we had in our 20s, then we were building about who we are and who we're becoming and establishing ourselves. And now we're in our 40s and our 50s, and we're kind of looking around and thinking, well, do I just buckle down and stick at this until I retire? And then what? I live a few more years and then I die. This is kind of the trajectory we've been on. Establish yourself, 20s, do the work into the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, retire, settle, die. That's the trajectory. And I'm someone who really wants to change that. It really doesn't make sense to me, especially now that we live into, some of us, into our 90s easily, the notion of retiring at 65, which is kind of ingrained in our culture. You've got a good 25 years after that to live and do and to be. So what is that going to look like? Are you going to be gardening and taking a couple cruises a year? For me, that just would seem like hell on earth. No, I don't want that. I want to be a thriving, active member in this society. And I hope you do too. This idea of Freedom 55, which was foisted upon us, in the 80s and 90s around financial investments and things, kind of brainwashed us in many ways to think about what this stage of life is supposed to look like. And I would tell you that it's a lie. Those advertisements are really created as a financial incentive to create money for the lending institution. And many of us, anyway, couldn't even afford to retire at 55 if we wanted to. There are a few who have done well with their investments, mostly on the entrepreneurial side of things, maybe, but those aren't the guys who are going to be retiring anyway, because they've got too much energy and dynamism to want to retire. And the other side of that equation is that governments need to rethink this idea about offering up pensions at 65, because those systems were set up at a time when we were dying in our 70s. So maybe you would live for 10 years after receiving your pension. Now we're living into our 90s. So does it really make sense? Maybe would be a better alternative would be some basic income for those that really need it. And then other incentives for us to keep productive and keep active and keep living our lives. I believe it's time to reset this narrative on midlife, and especially for us as men. So in midlife, it's not a time to think about retirement, but maybe it's about getting out of the drudgery and the grind that you are in. That doesn't necessarily mean retiring. There are a number of options to explore. It's about figuring out how to be more meaningful and purposeful and having a fulfilling life, one that's prosperous in more ways than the money way, for example. One that makes us want to jump out of bed in the morning because this life we're living is a gift. So that means in midlife, we need to refocus on the next steps, the next stage of life. Not the way we did in our 20s, though. In the 20s, we were looking at building our identities based on our ego, who we wanted to become, what our profession was going to be, all of that stuff. And some of us had some good success with that, maybe others not so much. But this is more about transitioning into a place of connecting to our higher selves. And in that connection, that's where we actually find peace and happiness. This is where many men get lost, though, because guess what? They're kind of disconnected from themselves and maybe don't really have a clue about where they are and where they want to go. I speak to hundreds of men, and they often find themselves rudderless in this midlife period. They may or may not be miserable in their career, but most of them aren't happy. And some no longer even have careers. They've been eaten up and thrown out by the system they were in. Most are struggling. Most of us struggle. Like I said earlier, 80% of people find this stage of life really, really tasking. So this is a time to reinvest in ourselves. Ideally, when we start to feel that disconnect setting in, rather than waiting for it to get deeply entrenched. Hiring a coach, for example, might be something to consider. Getting involved in a men's group, doing something outside of your comfort zone. These are our ways to kind of shift gears and for you to feel like there's some hope. Humans are kind of funny. We often wait until the last minute, until the pain of the situation is unbearable before we decide to act. I'm going to suggest not waiting that long. We know how the ego and the brain work. They want to protect us and keep us safe. And what that looks like is keeping us in the familiar, right? And when we get stuck there, this is where we run into problems. But it's hard to see where we can go when we're in the thick of it. So, what might doing things differently, investing in yourself, look like concretely? It could be a superficial exercise that we undertake. However, I believe it needs to be something more methodical, a deeper approach, maybe even something more metaphysical. Why? Because our well-established patterns of belief and behaviors, those occupy 90% of our time and they keep us in these loops. They will not permit us to connect to our true nature. They want us to stay where we're at. That keeps us safe. That keeps us comfortable. We don't want a midlife retrofit either that ends up looking more of the same. That won't actually meet our needs, and that will lead to cynicism and, frankly, further despair. I've seen it in guys who have tried various means to get through their midlife rut, failed at it, and then lose belief in themselves. I don't want that for you. We need to do more soul-driven work to ensure that we don't replicate patterns from our past. That's where someone like me, who has a proven method for working with clients through a series of activities to find a path for purpose and to thrive in the next stage of life, is really helpful. So here's the roadmap I use in my midlife mastery method. Stage one is really looking at your life to date and taking an honest accounting of it. Where are you at? What have you achieved? And maybe what have you failed at? And then in stage two, we spend some time doing self-reflection and becoming more aware of some of the unconscious patterns that are keeping us from moving forward, keeping us in that comfort zone, keeping us in the familiar, even if that familiar is a painful place to be. Stage three is envisioning a life fully lived and daring to dream large. You identify with who you want to become. You identify with what you want to be doing, how you'll be showing up for yourself and others, and really what that looks like and feels like. And then in stage four, we look at an assessment of values and strengths. We want and need a future that is driven by our values. One of the reasons you become disenfranchised in the work that you're doing is because it starts to feel soulless, and maybe your passion for it is gone if it once was there. We want you to tap into your strengths and feel fully aligned with what you'll do next in your life. Your job may have required you to do things that aren't in your wheelhouse, and that deflated you. So, this combination of values and strengths is fundamental in terms of moving you forward. It's powerful in terms of that change. Stage five takes all of the bits you've been doing thus far in terms of the method and assembles them into what is a purpose statement. This becomes really the North Star and the guiding light to lead you for the rest of your life. And we don't take this lightly, and this isn't done from a superficial, cerebral, intellectual exercise. We're diving in deep. We want it to be really clear. We will iterate it until we get it to that right spot. Stage six is really determining where we go from here. So you've got now your purpose statement, your North Star, your guiding light. What is it that you're going to be doing in the next 6 to 18 months that's going to lead you forward so that you're fulfilling that bigger purpose that you've just identified for yourself? And then stage seven is where this is an important one, where we look at some of the shadow aspects of who we are and how we might sabotage. There's so much inside of us that was going to get in the way, and we need to identify that stuff up front to make sure that planning forward is actually going to materialize, that we're not going to self-sabotage and run in the opposite direction. And then when all of this is complete, we do a little bit of fine tuning and then holding you to account, right? The accountability to move forward is really one of the areas where we humans tend to be pretty weak and to fall back. This is where coaching can be really valuable in this part of your life journey in particular. We know that any change is hard, and most of us kind of give up after minimal effort, which is unfortunate. We kind of recoil back into the comfort zone, even if we're not comfortable there. However, on the other side of change and other side of getting uncomfortable, There are amazing things that await us. And our little voice is saying, no, don't do it. I'm scared. But there's part of you that knows, no, I've got to move forward. If we as a society start to reconceptualize what it means to be in middle age, if there were more tools and supports to help us move through this, and I'm not specifically talking about therapy because, heck, we're not broken. We just need more tools to help us move through this morass, and then we'll all be better off as a society. Imagine a society where elders, those within their wisdom years, are doing all sorts of cool things, paid or unpaid. They're tapping into their passions. They're sharing their secret sauce. They're lighting up their lives and those around them. And they're being actively engaged in society even as they age. Yes, this would ease the burden on their healthcare system, and more people in the second half of life would be doing things that they feel so good about. They feel so alive, not sitting around letting themselves fall to pieces. Just as a wholesale change, we need to be thinking about investing in ourselves in midlife. There are people like myself and the Midlife Mastery Method who dream of a better future for guys and for society as a whole. We can and we will make this happen. I have faith in you. Do you? If you're interested in finding out about the Midlife Mastery Method, click the link below and you'll have access to my masterclass and you'll find out exactly what I do. Again, if you've enjoyed this, then I invite you to please like, comment, subscribe, and share. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.